dear lord.
If you like car crashes, then Home on the Range is like up there.
There were 3 cows, and there was a yodeler, and then there was also Buck the horse.
It depends on your definition of the word like.
Yeah, at the time.
Last year we were at a point where, conservatively, we watched Home on the Range once a month.
It's a gift that keeps on giving.
Truly. How is it that what was meant to be a milestone Disney animated film is largely forgotten by Disney-philes like my sister, and on the level of The Room or Mommy Dearest for my husband and I? Now a vague memory for many, it was the finale of Disney 2D animation, unbeknownst to the filmmakers during most of the production. Behind the scenes, Disney was struggling with a steady rise in competition as their renaissance was coming to an end, leading to a shift to computer animation. After a decade in development hell, with an ever-evolving plot, it found itself caught up in a mad dash into the future of feature animation, only to be left in the dust. In the middle of the bureaucratic chaos was a creative team, excited to do what they love most, and putting a lot of heart into it, like an underdog team facing down a Scrooge of a corporate bigwig. But this isn't some heartwarming sports film of the 1980s. It ain't no cowboy song either. No deer and antelope at play. This here's the story. Everything you could possibly know of Disney's Home on the Range. Released in 2004, Home on the Range is Walt Disney Animation Studios' 45th feature and their last traditionally animated film, until The Princess and the Frog in 2009, ending 81 years of Disney tradition on an absolute flop. Home on the Range earned $145.3 million worldwide, only about a third of that was domestic, and that was against a $110 million budget, meaning they earned back their budget but only profited about $35 million. The Alamo, released 1 week later on April 9, 2004, and respectively produced and distributed by Disney's Touchstone Pictures and Buena Vista Pictures Distribution, failed spectacularly, becoming one of the biggest box office bombs of all time. The losses on these films led to Disney having to essentially devalue the company, so the West may have been won, but for Disney in 2004, it was not winning. And neither were the Quaid brothers, because The Alamo stars Dennis Quaid, while Home on the Range prominently features his older brother, Randy Quaid. The protagonists of the film are 3 dairy cows: Maggie, voiced by Roseanne Barr, Mrs. Calloway, voiced by Judi Dench, and Grace, voiced by Jennifer Tilly. The secondary protagonist, Buck, the sheriff's horse, is voiced by Cuba Gooding Jr. The main antagonist, yodeling cattle rustler Alameda Slim, is voiced by Randy Quaid. Slim is typically accompanied by his dim-witted henchmen and nephews, known as the Willies, Bill, Gil, and Phil, voiced by one of the film's story artists, Sam J. Levine. Other notable actors featured in the movie include Steve Buscemi, Estelle Harris, and Patrick Warburton. The movie has some other interesting cast members. Carol Cook, voice of Farmer Pearl Gessner, played the wife of Mr. Limpet, who leaves her for a fish in 1964's The Incredible Mr. Limpet. Annie the saloon owner was voiced by former Governor of Texas Ann Richards. Additional voices include Bill Farmer, aka Goofy, as Donkey, Roger L. Jackson, aka the voice of Ghostface from the Scream films, as Tommy, Debbie Derryberry, aka Jimmy Neutron, as one of the saloon gals, Leslie Jordan as one of the flies and the photographer, and co-director John Sanford as the rooster. Sanford directed and wrote the film, along with Will Finn, and this was the directorial debut for both. Will Finn is a legendary animator with a long tenure at Disney, but started his animation career working on some of Don Bluth's earliest projects: The Secret of Nim, Dragon's Lair and Dragon's Lair 2, and Space Ace. John Sanford is a writer, story artist, character designer, and cartoonist. His earliest credit at Disney is working on the story for The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The film was scored by the legendary Alan Menken, who is responsible for some of Disney's greatest music. Lyrics are by Glenn Slater, for whom this was his Hollywood debut. His most notable work prior was writing songs for Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. This was the start of an ongoing creative collaboration between the two. Among their later collaborative works are Tangled and the stage adaptations of Sister Act and The Little Mermaid. Some of the film's songs were performed by country music artists, specifically Katie Lang, Bonnie Raitt, Tim McGraw, and the Bow Sisters. Before we can really dig into the aftermath of Home on the Range, as well as how it came to be, it's important to take a quick look at the story we ended up getting. If it's been a bit since you've seen Home on the Range and you need a quick refresher, then stick around. But if you're ready to get into the fallout and fall up of Home on the Range, then go ahead and skip to this timestamp. We start with the opening number, You Ain't Home on the Range, during which we follow the character Lucky Jack and his various misfortunes. We won't see Jack again until near the end of the movie, at which point you've most likely forgotten about him completely. Then we cut to Maggie, who narrates the beginning of the story. Within these first few sentences, we know exactly what Maggie's personality is going to be. Roseanne Barr in cow form. The rest of Maggie's herd was taken by the infamous outlaws Alameda Slim and the Willie Brothers gang, and as she's the only one left, her owner had to sell his ranch and bring her to live at a dairy farm, Patch of Heaven. Patch of Heaven is set on a lush green patch of land in the midst of the desert, home to farmer Pearl Gessner, her 2 dairy cows, Mrs. Calloway and Grace, a few dozen chickens, a rooster, a goat, a duck, and 5 pigs. Maggie arrives on the farm, making a bold entrance and immediately disrupting the peace of the farm. The sheriff, Sam, arrives with his horse Buck, who nearly takes them both out with his showy entrance. Sam is bringing Pearl a bank notice, saying that they'll evict her and auction off the farm in 3 days if she doesn't pay the $750 she owes. She waves off the bank notice, since she's been late on her payment in the past after a poor harvest, but Sam tells her they plan to make good on it, as they're collecting as many debts as possible due to the cattlemen going under. This is where we and Maggie learn that hers wasn't the only ranch to go under. Before he leaves, Sam suggests that Pearl sell off some of her livestock, and Pearl angrily tells him, "You don't sell family," then runs him off the farm. She heads inside to collect herself, and Jeb the goat is the first among them to break the silence.
Well, I think we all know what happens now. Now we all get eaten.
The animals do what Pearl should have done before simply giving up, because she's plumb out of ideas, and try to brainstorm some ideas of their own. Maggie, herself a blue ribbon show cow, suggests that they all compete at the county fair, but it's 2 weeks away, so Maggie, Grace, and Mrs. Calloway head to town to talk to Buck and get him to convince Sam to extend the deadline. How Buck would communicate that, I don't know. On their trek to town, we are introduced to the very important plot point of Grace being tone deaf. In town, Buck daydreams of being a Western hero and is overjoyed when he overhears that Rico the bounty hunter, his idol, is on his way with his latest bounty. Through a series of mishaps that culminate in a saloon brawl, the cows locate Buck, who rebuffs them, and before they can formulate a new plan, Rico appears.
Rico.
Looking like Disney's Wild West interpretation of Wolverine. Spoiler alert, Buck and Rico are going to prove pointless to the main plot. The sheriff tells Rico that the last outlaw on the run is Alameda Slim, and the reward for finding Slim is $750. Maggie tries to convince the cows to hunt down Slim themselves, while Buck shows off for Rico, who needs a fresh horse and asks for Buck. Maggie spots a chuck wagon headed on a cattle drive, and we get one of my favorite moments in the movie.
Tommy, have fun on that cattle drive.
All right then.
Mrs. Calloway sees red after Maggie shoulder checks her and knocks her hat off. This will become important later, leading to the two of them fighting in the street and the 3 cows getting tied to the chuck wagon. They pass Dixon Ranch, Maggie's former home, as it's being auctioned off, and Maggie reveals to her companions what happened to the ranch. The ranch itself is auctioned off to Mr. Yancey Odell. At the cattle drive, the dairy cows are faced with sexual harassment, until they are all frozen in their tracks when Alameda Slim and the Willies appear. Slim hypnotizes the cattle via his yodeling and draws them away like the Pied Piper. The only one not hypnotized is Grace, because she's tone deaf. The main takeaway of the song is that Alameda Slim is a yodeler of such ability he can hypnotize cattle, and also that he's fat. Rico and Buck arrive shortly before Slim makes his escape, and Rico asks the cowboys for one of their horses, since he thinks Buck is too skittish around cows. The cows go their own way, and Buck decides to set off on his own to catch Slim and impress Rico. In Slim's lair, he gathers the cattle and his methodology is fully revealed. He steals cattle from different ranches, why the cattlemen are going under, and sells them, using the money to buy the land he stole from while disguised as Yancey Odell. His true motives are to get revenge against the ranch bosses who couldn't appreciate his talents, as he takes yodeling very seriously. After discovering Patch of Heaven on a map and learning it's up for auction, he sets his sights on buying the farm. The cows traverse the desert, following the cattle tracks to find Slim. Buck, in yet another moment that will prove his side plot exists simply to fill up runtime, sees the cows aren't far behind him and tramples the tracks to throw them off. But that doesn't matter because a flash flood comes and washes out the tracks. The following morning, after the storm has passed, the cows awake to Lucky Jack. Remember him from the opening of the movie? Making them breakfast, and he leads them to Echo Mine, his former home that Slim took over as his lair. Back in Echo Mine, Wesley, the man Slim has been selling the stolen cattle to, arrives. As the cows arrive at the mine, they see Buck trying to convince Junior to let him in. He lets the cows in, and Buck instead follows Rico, who he spotted making his way around the mountain. In the mine, Slim is counting his money while the Willies load the cattle into Wesley's train, but they are short 3 cows. Grace, Maggie, and Mrs. Calloway appear. Maggie and Mrs. Calloway's ears are blocked by some of Jack's tail fur so they can't be hypnotized by Slim, and they manage to capture Slim and wheel him away in one of the mine carts. Separate chases through the mines ensue as Wesley tries to make his getaway on the train with both the cattle and the money, but eventually the different chases all collide with the train. Slim throws the cows onto the train and introduces Wesley to his business partner, Rico, who had been working for Slim to help cover up his tracks, much to Buck's dismay and disappointment. Buck throws Rico off his back and lives out his hero dreams as he fights off the Willies, making it possible for the cows to try and make their escape. This is the first and one of 2 times Buck actually affects the main plot. Unable to easily break out, Maggie takes Mrs. Calloway's hat and throws it off the train, triggering her extreme anger so they can burst through the wall of the train car. The cows take over the train and use it to make their way back to Patch of Heaven. At the Patch of Heaven auction, just after the property is sold to Yancey Odell, the cows lose control of the train and it crashes into the farm. Slim recognizes the cows, who direct the other farm animals to attack him. They knock Slim into the train's steam stack and blow off his disguise, revealing his identity to the townsfolk. In a last-ditch effort to escape, he yodels to try and hypnotize the cows, but thanks to Grace's martial arts skills, he is silenced and carted off to jail. The bounty for Slim is given to Pearl, allowing her to buy back the farm and animals. It flash-forwards to the farm, now flourishing. Lucky Jack is now a resident of the farm, sharing Jeb's barrel, and the 2 give real Statler and Waldorf vibes.
I fool him every time!
Pearl and Sam return from the county fair with Buck, the cows, Ollie the pig, the duck, the rooster, and chicks. Pearl's animals all returning as blue ribbon prize winners. This makes me wonder, why didn't Pearl make them show animals sooner? She has all these animals she can't make money off of. The pigs and Jeb are, at best, good for garbage disposal, and would only otherwise be good for their meat, but they're family. Pearl offers nor considers common sense solutions, just mopes leading to the animals solving everything for her, and she reaps the benefits of their heroic efforts. Pearl is the real villain. Bob and Barry, 2 of the sexually harassing bulls from the cattle drive, and Junior arrive to join the celebration, which is strange considering Junior, up until this point, was seemingly loyal to Slim without being hypnotized. Anyway, they all live happily ever after. Home on the Range premiered at the El Capitan Theater on March 21st, 2004, with the red carpet leading to a country fair. Guests were encouraged to come dressed in your best Western wear. Some got the memo, but not all. Attending from the cast and crew were Roseanne Barr, along with her son, named, funny enough, Buck, Cuba Gooding Jr., Randy Quaid, Estelle Harris, with her dog Zaza, Charles Hayde, voice of Lucky Jack, Charlie Dell, voice of Ollie the Pig, Charles Dennis, voice of Rico, Will Finn, John Sanford, producer Alice Dewey Goldstone, Alan Menken, and Glenn Slater. The premiere also served as a family outing for some celebrities like Ed Begley Jr. and daughter Hayden, Jeff Garlin, David Hasselhoff, Kevin Smith, rocking his own merch, Snoogans, though this feels a bit like a missed opportunity to wear some Moo-vie's gear, and daughter Harley Quinn Smith. From the Disney and Disney-adjacent stable of stars were Allie and AJ, Amy Bruckner, Brie Larson, Daryl Sabara, whose twin sister Eve provided an additional voice for the movie, DeVay Chase, and Lelaine. In my opinion, the best looks were Brie Larson and Lelaine because both stayed on theme while giving their outfits a personal twist. I mean, come on, Lelaine's little cow moment on her ankle is so cute. I didn't want to point out any personal things, especially the reprehensible things, having to do with some of the people involved with this movie. However, this next person is infamous for and synonymous with the reprehensible things he's done at this point, but his presence at the premiere is so bizarre it bears mentioning. And that's Harvey Weinstein, who appears to have been on parking duty? Huh. The sexually harassing bulls make so much more sense now.
And utter madness.
Yeah, they're real. Quit staring.
Home on the Range was released in theaters on April 2nd, 2004, and the response wasn't spectacular. The kinder reviews boiled it down to not being on the level expected of Disney, comparing it to Beauty and the Beast and The Lion King, and saying that it felt more like Looney Tunes, not Disney. But your kids will probably like it. Other reviewers didn't hold back in their criticisms of Home on the Range. In the opening lines of his review, Elvis Mitchell of the New York Times said it was seldom funny and that it may be the first film to require cortisone treatments from jamming its elbow in the audience's ribs so often. It made around $14 million its opening weekend, coming in fourth behind Scooby-Doo 2: Monsters Unleashed, Walking Tall, and Hellboy. By the end of its theatrical run, Home on the Range had earned $145.3 million globally, and only about $50 million of that was domestic. Disney clearly took the $95.3 million from the international market to heart because they released far more media having to do with Home on the Range internationally. In the US, we had the standard Disney Store plush and figurine packs, plush based on the DVD bonus feature called A Dairy Tale: The Three Little Pigs, as well as a Game Boy Advance game. But internationally, Alameda Slim was included in the UK 2005 direct-to-DVD release Once Upon a Halloween, in which the evil queen calls upon fellow villains to help her conquer Halloween. It had a limited edition cover and sleeve only in the UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, and Italy on re-releases between 2014 and 2016. It's been included in 3 Disney film box sets, a 3-movie box set with Cinderella and Tarzan, released in France in 2005, 50 Disney classics, released in Mexico in 2015, and 55 Disney classics, released in the UK and Ireland in 2018. As I mentioned at the beginning, The Alamo was released 1 week after Home on the Range and was an abysmal failure. It only earned back 24% of its $107 million budget. These losses resulted in Disney having to write down the company by $70 million. Disney's continual struggles and failures at the time led to then Walt Disney Company chairman and CEO Michael Eisner announcing in March 2005 that he would be prematurely stepping down, handing the reins over to Bob Iger. It is interesting that Disney was expecting Western movies to succeed in 2004 when 5 years earlier they had put out a movie that was partially about how audiences aren't interested in Western-themed entertainment anymore. But I get the sense that, on the part of the company itself, there wasn't a lot of thought put into many things at the time. The 2002 documentary The Sweatbox gives a glimpse into the creative executive clashes that mar many a Disney production, especially in the early 2000s. It follows the production of the movie Kingdom of the Sun, which began development in 1994 and, after getting as far as recording most of the dialogue and completing a decent amount of animation, underwent significant changes in 1999, including completely changing the story and almost entirely recasting. The movie was finally released in December 2000 with its new title, The Emperor's New Groove. The Sweatbox serves as an example of how, in the production of a Disney animated feature, especially in the 90s and early 2000s, there were no sacred cows. Sometime between 1991 and 1992, animator and director Mike Gabriel pitched 2 movie ideas to Disney executives, Jeffrey Katzenberg, Peter Schneider, Roy E. Disney, and Michael Eisner, Pocahontas, and a Western-themed film. After finishing production on Pocahontas in 1995, Gabriel returned to his Western idea. He wanted to create a classic adventure set in the American West, heavily inspired by Rudyard Kipling's Captains Courageous, but swapping the ocean for the desert. The original concept was far more human-centered, following a young boy from the East Coast who is sent to the western United States by his railroad-owning father. The boy is knocked from the train after it's held up by outlaws, and he finds himself on a cattle drive. Gabriel's well-received 40-page treatment for the project, then titled Sweating Bullets, officially began development, and Gabriel brought on Michael Giaimo to co-direct. Between 1995 and 1999, the story went through successive changes. First into a supernatural story, inspired by the 1948 country western song Ghost Riders in the Sky, in which a young cowboy stumbles upon a ghost town and encounters Slim, who, in this first iteration of the character, is an undead cattle rustler. With the help of his ghostly henchmen, the Willies, they would drive herds of cattle off of cliffs so they may join Slim's ghostly herd. The backstory for this version of Slim is that when he was alive, he was a cattle rustler who was stampeded to death during an attempt to steal a herd. He vowed to avenge his own death by killing off herds throughout the West. At some point, the protagonist became a young bull named Bullets. Allegedly, this was because when the movie was pitched to Michael Eisner, he said he thought it was going to be about one of the cattle. Bullets wanted to be like the horses who led the herd, such as Duke, later Jake, and eventually Buck. Bullets would prove his courage by preventing the rest of his herd from falling off of the cliffs to their doom. As a side note, it's probably best not to include this whole animals going off of cliffs to their death storyline in a Disney movie, considering Disney is partially responsible, in a very horrific way, for the common misconception about lemmings and cliffs. Another character introduced with this new iteration of the story was a rabbit with an injured foot, and later on, a peg leg, named Lucky Jack. Jack was, as he stayed in the final version, ironically unlucky. Like Grace in the final version, Jack was very new age. In 1998, producer Alice Dewey Goldstone joined the project, and the following year was when development really began to pick up steam. At the beginning of 1999, Peter Schneider was promoted to president of Walt Disney Studios, with Thomas Schumacher, formerly a producer, taking over as president of Walt Disney Feature Animation. Schneider and Schumacher convinced Alan Menken to join the project. According to an anecdote from Alan Menken, Schumacher appeared at a press event wearing white fuzzy chaps and a cowboy hat to promote the project. The song Little Patch of Heaven was recorded by K.D. Lang, among the first completed songs of the film. Around a dozen members of the crew, including Mike Gabriel, Alice Dewey Goldstone, and background supervisor Christy Maltese, went on a research trip to Wyoming, where they went on an actual cattle drive. According to Gabriel, they drove a herd from the high country to a lower elevation for winter feeding, and did everything you could imagine on that drive, including camping out, saddling their horses at the crack of dawn, and making campfires at night. On the trip, Maltese took only black and white photos, wanting to be creative with the colors of the film, and drew inspiration from classic Disney animated westerns, like the stories of Johnny Appleseed and Pecos Bill in Melody Time. The story was still struggling, though, and wanting to salvage the project and the work done so far, story artist Michael Labash suggested they change the focus to being about 3 bounty-hunting cows. It was also around this time that the Pied Piper element was introduced. Originally, Maggie was written to be a Patch of Heaven resident from the start, and was the leader of the farm, similar to the role filled by Mrs. Calloway in the final version. The 3 cows appeared to be longhorns and had distinctive colors. Maggie was an orange-pink, Mrs. Calloway was purple, preserved in the final film in her beloved hat, and Grace was tan, as she is in the final version. There was also a tree in an early version that was, according to Christy Maltese, dear to the cows. Eventually, Maggie became styled after a Hereford cow, Mrs. Calloway a classic Holstein, and Grace a Jersey cow. The change from Bullets to the 3 cows led to changes for other characters as well. Buck was the farm's horse, formerly owned by a bounty hunter, and at another point he was the Pony Express horse. In one version of his entrance, he kicked over a can of water that was being saved due to a drought. At another point, there was a story-framing device of 3 mariachi butterflies, 2 of which were named Jorge and Humberto, who narrated the story and would stay tied to the story by hanging out with Buck. The opening song sung by these characters, called Heroes and Villains and Cows, was recorded and the scene partially animated. Pearl was originally a male character. There was also a deleted line that would have given some of her backstory. When reading the eviction notice and listing off the difficulties that Patch of Heaven had gone through in the past, Pearl was going to say, twisters, blizzards, and buried 3 husbands. There was also a removed Vulture character. Slim, the only character to somewhat survive from the original concept, of course went through the most changes. When the character was made corporeal, his motivations had to change too. Some scrapped ideas included wanting to own gold mines and wanting to be the most wanted outlaw. The wildest of these ideas, for which dialogue was recorded, was that Slim was hypnotizing the cows to form a cattle army to stampede Washington so he could take over the White House and become president.
President? President?
President?
Where's he going with this?
The year 2000 would bring the first major bumps in the road, a sign of what was to come. Mike Gabriel and Michael Giaimo were kicked off the project, with their last day at the studio being October 17th, 2000. They were soon after replaced by Will Finn, who was originally going to be Maggie's lead animator, and John Sanford, who was brought on at Finn's request. By the end of November, their cast was mostly set. Cuba Gooding Jr., Dame Judi Dench, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Janae Dubois were on board, with Randy Quaid in talks to join. Dubois and Parker were, respectively, cast as Maggie and Grace. Production officially began on April 15, 2001, and the movie was set to be Disney's 44th animated feature, slated to be released around Thanksgiving 2003. Their animated Bears project, as it was then referred to, was to be the 45th and released in the spring of 2004. In June, Peter Schneider resigned, leaving the role of what was now chairman of Walt Disney Studios vacant. Thomas Schumacher was one of 3 people Schneider's responsibilities were divided amongst. Schumacher also had other priorities while juggling these additional duties. There was one project that was, by all accounts, a pet project for Schumacher, one that he was trying to protect from Michael Eisner's influence, Lilo and Stitch. It's likely the other animated features in production at the time were thrown to the wolves and suffered because of this. While the other story about Eisner's input is alleged, Will Finn has shared that Michael Eisner was the one to suggest that Slim use the money from selling the cattle to buy up the land. Meanwhile, Alan Menken was struggling to compose a song for the middle of the film to capture the feeling of hopelessness after the flash flood. He was intending for it to be a sad reprise of Little Patch of Heaven, but the rest of the team urged him to write an entirely new song. He eventually wrote the melody of Will the Sun Ever Shine Again in response to 9/11. 6 months into production, Sarah Jessica Parker left the project as they had decided to go in a different direction with Grace, and Thomas Schumacher suggested Jennifer Tilly for the role. They also went a different direction with Maggie, making her an outsider to the farm, leading to Roseanne Barr being cast in the role. Due to their busy schedules, Cuba Gooding Jr. and Judi Dench literally phoned in many of their lines and recorded via video and phone calls. I'm not sure what point it was when they changed the title to Home on the Range, but it was rumored that Disney didn't want to put out a project with bullets in the title, and that for the same reason they allegedly removed all references to bullets and guns from the movie. Except that makes no sense because there are multiple scenes where guns are seen and used. Things at Walt Disney Feature Animation would take a drastic turn in 2002. The role of chairman of Walt Disney Studios was finally filled by Dick Cook, and around the same time, Thomas Schumacher announced that he would be stepping down from his role as president of Walt Disney Feature Animation, but not before ushering in some major changes for the animation department. Schumacher announced in March that up to 265 employees would be laid off over the following year. He also stated that, "We're an ambidextrous studio that can create traditional and digital movies. We're not going out of the traditional business, but we are expanding our digital business." However, Disney also planned to spend $1 million to train their animators on computer animation. Supposedly, at a meeting Schumacher held just prior to leaving, he said he thought Disney would be just fine if it killed off traditional animation. Schumacher's successor, David Stainton, appeared to have his focus elsewhere as he was busy putting plants on all of the landings in the feature animation building, allegedly at the direction of a feng shui consultant. In 2003, the skewed focus of the animation studio became even more apparent when the feature animation building's lobby was adorned with Finding Nemo stickers in celebration of that movie's release, even though that's a Pixar movie, and Walt Disney Feature Animation had nothing to do with that production. Morale had dropped considerably, and it was apparent that Disney had given up on 2D animation. By the spring, there were only about 60 traditional animators left at the studio. They even began selling off the animators' furniture while they were still working on Home on the Range. As soon as they finished production, Their desks were gone and the building transformed into a cubicle farm. Disney wasn't marketing Home on the Range, which at this point had swapped release dates with Brother Bear, as their final 2D animated feature, but it was widely reported in trade and other publications at the time. The once enthused team's low morale wasn't helped by reports that audiences were responding negatively at early screenings of the movie. An August 2003 article from mouseplanet.com claims that an insider said one of the notes that came back from the preview screening said that the movie was more boring than church. It's a shame that Disney is going to go out with Home being the last example of what Disney can do. I haven't been able to find any evidence of this, but Will Finn supposedly wrote an email to David Koenig, the author of that article, refuting those claims and defending the movie. A Jim Hill Media article from October 2003 also contradicts those claims, sharing an email from a reader in the Orlando area who was invited to a test screening and claimed the audience responded positively. But time would tell, and on April 2, 2004, Home on the Range was released in theaters. As we've already covered, the response to Home on the Range leaned toward the negative. Insiders and fans alike were beginning to believe that Home on the Range, as well as Treasure Planet and Brother Bear, were intentionally marketed poorly and set up to fail in order to justify Disney's pivot to computer animation. Home on the Range was released at an odd time of year, while Treasure Planet was put up against Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Brother Bear was a holiday release, but not as widely marketed as past Disney animated features. Notably, there also wasn't a McDonald's Happy Meal tie-in with Home on the Range, even though Disney had a long-standing deal with McDonald's. According to the June 2004 Jim Hill Media article, Was Home on the Range Deliberately Underpromoted?, a member of Disney's marketing department told Hill that McDonald's declined to make Home on the Range Happy Meal toys, not wanting kids to make the cow-hamburger connection. He also quotes a friend who worked on the film who said that Disney pushed them to steer away from the slaughterhouse angle, to appease McDonald's, and said that Disney's marketing department were desperate to get McDonald's help in promoting Home on the Range. In the same article, the member of Disney's marketing department defended their promotion of Home on the Range, pointing to the in-park promos done at the time. As of January 2004, the Brother Bear promotional displays in the Emporium windows on Main Street USA in Disneyland had been swapped out for Home on the Range. No photos of these displays survive online, but based on descriptions, they sounded pretty underwhelming. A pre-parade show ran daily at the Magic Kingdom in Walt Disney World from March 5th to April 16th, 2004, ahead of the Share a Dream Come True parade. There are no photos or videos available online for this either, but according to guest accounts in Disney forums, the show consisted of 2 floats accompanied by horseback riders. One of the floats was a barn with puppets of the characters, and most likely the same barn float used in the Boo to You and other seasonal parades. Pearl and the show's dancers would encourage guests to square dance along to Little Patch of Heaven. In Disneyland, Big Thunder Ranch was given a Little Patch of Heaven overlay, becoming a petting zoo with seemingly random Home on the Range theming. This lasted from early 2004 until late 2005, when it was rethemed for the holidays. In early 2006, the remaining Home on the Range theming was slowly removed from the area. Having visited Walt Disney World myself in June of 2004, the closest I witnessed to anything pertaining to Home on the Range was a performance of Ghost Riders in the Sky by the Frontierland Bluegrass Band while waiting for the raft to Tom Sawyer Island. I don't remember if I saw Home on the Range in theaters, but I do have vivid memories from when it was released on DVD after my dad bought it for my sister and I. So I am here with my sister Julia. Julia, I have a question to ask you. Do you remember, and what do you remember of the movie Home on the Range?
Dear Lord. There were 3 cows, and there was a yodeler that when he yodeled, it made them kind of follow him. Mm-hmm. And then there was also Buck the horse.
Yes. Is there anything else you just remember like that of the story?
The characters, yeah.
Do you remember liking it?
Yeah, at the time.
Alright, well that's it. That's all you can give me. It's okay if that's it. Okay. I didn't know how much you remembered.
It's just been such a long time since I've seen it, so it's I kind of really don't remember a whole lot.
One thing I remember, that one line we used to love and always make jokes about, was when the pigs are like, "Kill the goat!"
Kill the goat!
Do you remember that one? Well, thanks for nothing. In her defense, I spent a lot of time watching that movie by myself. I have vivid memories of sitting at my dad's computer until the early morning hours, watching Home on the Range and all of its bonus features. It was around this age that I became obsessed with devouring every bit of content on a DVD, and this one was no exception. 11-year-old me would watch the movie all the way through, then again with the commentary track on, then the making of featurette, art review, deleted scenes, a dairy tale, the music video for the Bow Sisters' Anytime You Need a Friend, the Joke Corral, and all of Yodelmania, the Yodel Memory Game, Yodelmentary, and Yodelmaker. Eventually, this obsession moved on to greener pastures, as did my memory of Home on the Range, but this didn't last forever. I mean, how do you think I got to the point of making this? My husband and I enjoy the occasional evening of playing one of the Seen It board games, and one evening, one of us hit a My Play on one of the Disney editions of Seen It, and a Home on the Range clip came up. I asked him if he'd ever seen it, he hadn't, and suggested that it could be a good, so bad it's good watch. Shane, what can you tell me about the 2004 Disney masterpiece, Home on the Range?
Masterpiece is, I would say the right word here, but it depends on what type of art you're looking for. If you like car crashes, then Home on the Range is like up there with, you're talking about like The Room, Birdemic, things like that.
Suffice it to say, we are bad movie aficionados and have a regular rotation of bad movies, and Home on the Range is definitely one of them. Last year, we were at a point where, conservatively, we watched Home on the Range once a month.
I think that is a fair measurement, sometimes twice. It's a gift that keeps on giving.
Truly. And do you like it?
It depends on your definition of the word like. In terms of story, animation, things like that, no. In terms of appreciating the amount of laughs I've had at stuff they probably didn't want me to laugh at, I enjoyed immensely. It's one of my favorites.
What do you think were the wackiest choices they made in making this movie?
I think that I don't like a lot of the musical choices, because to me it really felt like they just kind of went, country western, here you go. But I don't know. I think like that random Pearl Sad song, you could cut that entire scene from the movie and it would do nothing to the story. It would offer no change. She's sad.
Before you continue, can I tell you something about that Pearl song?
Yeah.
So originally that scene, it was going to be a reprise of the Patch of Heaven song. Like a sad, "Hunnell Place, prettiest pie,"
That but sad.
Yes, but then instead they used the song that ended up in the movie, which Alan Menken initially wrote about 9/11.
No. He did not. Really? Yeah, losing a farm that you've never paid for, 9/11, figure it out.
I don't want to write a "Where do we go from here" song. I mean, what do we do with it? 9/11 happened during the making of this film. I wanted to write something, do something.
I mean, as millennials, we were kids, we remember, when that happened.
Sure.
So I'm not laughing like it's something that I'm, removed from in some way.
It's so disproportionate.
Yeah. And he's a, theater guy, so in New York, it's very close to him, but it was just it was just how sincere he was about it, and how he was like, I just wanted to write a song to capture what I was feeling post 9/11. And then he's like, put it in the Cow movie!
And then it offers the Cow movie nothing. Though I will give them some credit that Alameda Slim, one of the best Disney villains I've ever seen, he does absolutely nothing. Or actually, no, let me take that back. He does a bunch, and I would argue...
He does too much.
He does too much, yes.
Who is your least favorite character in Home on the Range?
You know how many times we've seen this movie? I still don't remember the names of the main cows. And I don't care about any of them. Honestly, I hate Buck. I greatly dislike Buck. he's like somewhere between a dude that thinks he knows kung fu and like James Brown, like with a lot of like James Brown improvisation. No, he really like straight up quotes them.
Hey, don't back kiss myself.
And also the fact that he's like really obsessed with getting ridden by like Cowboy Wolverine. Because Rico is just, they literally just looked at Logan outside of the Wolverine costume and they were like, that.
Who is your favorite character? Is it just one?
Of course not. Who are you? No, I love the Willies.
Who are you? What do you do with Uncle Slim?
They are, I don't know if I love them because they are my favorite characters or because the joke is so dumb to me.
No, and that joke isn't funny, but honestly, and maybe it's like a Stockholm Syndrome thing from having seen it too many times, but I love the way they respond to things. Like, I think that's what makes them so genuinely funny compared to a lot of the other humor in the movie. Because it's not the fact that they're like, we can't recognize him. It's that their response is to go, who are you? And it's really, Philistine.
Philistine!
Thank you, Shane. In hindsight, it feels a bit unfair to call this a bad movie. I wouldn't call it a good movie, certainly not within the Disney canon, but it's definitely not the worst. Its genuinely good parts are good. I don't think I'll ever stop laughing at the Willies or Tommy and Donkey, and its bad parts are comically bad. It's evident that there are a lot of good concepts that they were unable to fully execute or had to scrap entirely, and what we're left with is a pile of half-baked ideas spiced with an attempt to commemorate a dying art form. Joining so late in the project, when so many of the story decisions had already been set, it was up to Will Finn and John Sanford to essentially assemble a puzzle while battling executives who had lost respect for their art. Disney changed the film industry forever with the release of the first feature-length animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but now the same company was forsaking the art form that had defined them for decades. Finn, Sanford, and others working on the project saw the writing on the wall, and in the peak of the battle between CGI and 2D, they decided to lean into their medium and make Home on the Range as cartoony as possible. In Will Finn's opinion, animated films at the time were becoming too pretentious, so they aimed for the polar opposite and wanted to be silly. It's why reviewers comparing it more to Looney Tunes than a typical Disney film is a more on-the-nose comparison than they probably realized. By the time it reached development, the focus had shifted from making a classic Disney film, though, as we've seen, there are homages to classic Disney, to simply making a true animated movie. One thing I saw repeated by the filmmakers, from the early stages with Mike Gabriel and Michael Giaimo, to the final crew that worked on it, was that they wanted this movie to be fun. It's a shame that some of them look back on the movie and wonder if it was worth it. Because it is fun, and has the potential to find the right audience on streaming and become far more beloved than it was at the time of its release. The same insider who told David Koenig about the negative response at early screenings also said he wouldn't be surprised if Home on the Range is criticized as Disney's worst film since The Black Cauldron. If Home on the Range does someday strike audience gold, the comparison to The Black Cauldron could be seen as an apt one, as that movie is now a cult classic, and Home on the Range is primed to become a cult classic in its own right. Opinions have shifted toward the positive in the 22 years since its release. Movie review sites show rather mixed opinions. It has 2.8 stars on Letterboxd, and on Rotten Tomatoes has 51% on the Tomato Meter, with an audience review score of 30%. It's still memorable enough that in 2024, Box Lunch released a 20th anniversary Home on the Range t-shirt. The lean into being cartoony with exaggerated character designs and movements makes Home on the Range feel a bit campy. And the audiences who do love it are particularly drawn to the camp, especially Alameda Slim. Last July, when I attempted my own Alameda Slim drag look, I thought I was the only one with this idea, so I was pleasantly surprised to find that I wasn't even kind of the first. That honor goes to drag queen Iris XC, who shared her performance as Slim to Instagram on December 27th, 2022. Drag king Dick Kayan did his take on Alameda Slim on July 15th, 2024, and cosplayer Effervescent Erin began sharing her Slim cosplay to Instagram in September of last year, and I'll be the first to acknowledge that their takes on the character are leaps and bounds better than my own. Still, there are parts of Home on the Range that don't age well, especially the numerous fat jokes. On a technical level, it's at best mid-tier, but is that all that makes a movie enjoyable? In learning about the development of the movie and just how much went into making it, it's easy to develop an appreciation for it through that lens. This is a movie that I loved unironically as a kid and later on came to love ironically. Now that I've spent so much time with it, I love it with a mix of irony and sincerity. If there's one thing the makers of Home on the Range set out to do and achieved, it's that Home on the Range is fun. Whew! Oh, my head! I don't know what to say now. I have spent over a year working on this video, from research, writing my script, and now recording it. I've literally been just at the recording part for hours. My microphone died twice. I have put so much into this video. This has been a real labor of love and honestly a really fun project to work on. So thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. I really appreciate you. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry, I need to collect myself. I'm like sweating my tuchus off. One thing I wanted to be sure to include, I just couldn't fit it anywhere else in the video, is that the book They Drew As They Pleased Volume 6, which was an excellent source for this video, has some concept art for Home on the Range that I was not able to find online, and I didn't want to reproduce like what was in the book, so do yourself a favor and check that book out. Do what I did and use your library card to get it on Hoopla. Obligatory SpongeBob reference here. Hoopla! If you're interested, I was thinking about making a video of how I would make Home on the Range, just because in all of this time I've spent working on this and thinking about this movie, I have thought about how I would change the story to make it work, maybe make it a bit better, I don't know. Maybe not better. That's really full of myself. Anyway, I also hope in the future to make a similar video about The Great Mouse Detective, because I feel like The Great Mouse Detective and Home on the Range kind of bookend a specific era at Disney in very interesting ways, and they mirror each other in interesting ways. So stick around if you want to see that and all of the other fun videos I have planned for the future, but for now, it's time to hit the old dusty trail. That was not as smooth as I hoped it would be. Anyway, thank you again for watching. Let me know what you thought about this. If there's anything I missed somehow, I feel like I put everything I possibly could, let me know. And I'll see you in the next one. So long. Bye.
Have you done voice work in animation?
Only once.
Oh, which one?
Yes, Home on the Range.
Yes.
It was when Brokeback Mountain came out. This man came up very, very angry, banging on the door window with a placard saying "Homo on the Range." Round the window. I said, this is about cows.